Hi everyone, I'm Mila. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and in today's video I want to talk about medical alert IDs and why they are so important. So before we get into the video, I just want to say please subscribe and like the video if you enjoy it. Also, comment down below, tell me if you have a medical alert bracelet first of all, or ID, what kind you have, because I'm curious. And tell me what kind of stuff you have on there. Like, do you have like different conditions you have, different medications you can't have, like what's going on there, because I know what I have on mine and I need to update mine, so please give me some ideas because she really needs an update. Also, if you don't have a medical alert ID, please tell me how the audio sounds. I think last week or last video was the first video with like better quality audio, I hope. So hopefully this one isn't horrible. I am having to hold my mic this week just because the way I'm sitting, my mic stand was just like, nah, we're not going to hold the mic where you need it to be. So I'm having to hold it. So I'm sorry if it's like moving around a lot and bothering you. It bothers me too, I promise. So let's get into the video. Medical alert IDs have been around since the 1950s, and they're used by emergency personnel in emergency situations. They give a little snapshot into who the patient is and what kinds of things they may need, just in different random emergency situations. Typically, people get a bracelet or a necklace, but there are a lot of other high-tech options out there. There's apps, other things I get into in like later in the video. So check with your doctor to see if a medical alert ID would be helpful or useful for you. So if you need a medical alert ID, there are some important things that you need to consider putting on there. There's limited space, so make sure you give precedence to like the stuff that's the most important, obviously. But these are all some things that could be on there should you have space for them or need them to be on there. So chronic medical conditions obviously need to be on there. Things like asthma, diabetes, chronic heart issues, epilepsy, things like that. Just because, you know, if an epileptic person has a seizure, they can have multiple of those in a day and be okay, whereas someone who doesn't have epilepsy, if they have a seizure, something big is going on and it's not okay. So having a medical alert bracelet or an ID can alert medical professionals that, hey, this is something that they go through, but if it lasts too long, we'll take them to the emergency room, stuff like that. So those are some chronic conditions. There are more, obviously. I'm not going to go into all of them because this is a YouTube video and not a dissertation. So you should also consider putting on some medication, like putting medications on your ID. Things like blood thinning medications, just in case you have internal bleeding. So you're in a car accident and you're on blood thinners, you could bleed out internally and not really have any outward signs of it right away. You should also put on there any medicines that you're allergic to. I'm allergic to aspirin, so I need to put on my bracelet, no aspirin, because if I have it, I will have an asthma attack. It's great. So some other stuff you should put on there so you should include medical devices if you carry anything. So for me, I have my pump. I used to have my CGM. But if you have a pacemaker, something like that, you should also include that information because that's very important. If you have space on your medical alert bracelet or have some circulatory issues, you might want to consider putting your blood type on your medical alert ID. Just in case you need a transfusion for some reason. That way it's a little bit easier for the emergency medical teams to respond and get you the transfusion that you need. So that's useful. A few other things. If you have missing or transplanted organs, you might want to consider putting that on there, particularly for transplanted organs, because if you have a transplanted organ, you're likely on immunosuppressant medications, and those can make you more susceptible to infection. So that's just, something to consider. And then another thing is if you have some challenges with communication or cooperativity, like if you have autism, schizophrenia, other conditions similar to that, like being nonverbal, deaf, blind, those kinds of things, it can make the EMT's job a lot easier to know, hey, this person's blind. I need to guide them in an emergency situation, maybe a little bit differently than I would, guide someone who's not vision impaired at all. Or, hey, this person is deaf. They can't hear me. I need to get a sign language interpreter. I need to write things out for them so that they know what I need them to do. Just giving people the heads up in emergency situations is very helpful. If you have do not resuscitate orders, that should be on there just in case, there becomes a time when people are like, do we resuscitate them or not? It can be helpful if you have a do not resuscitate order to put on there, do not resuscitate, or DNR. Those can just be helpful things to put on there. Another helpful thing to put on there are just some basic simple instructions like call 911 or whatever the emergency number is in your, I almost said state, whatever the emergency response number is in your country. And then any emergency contact information as needed. I know for my bracelet, I have both my mother and my father's phone number on there, just in case, something happens, as emergency response contact info, because, maybe your medical ID is, outdated. And if something happens and the emergency medical personnel contact your emergency contact, they can say, okay, this is what's up. This is their current medical stuff. This is what's going on. And that can be helpful for them. Okay, so that was a lot of words. And I don't know if you guys know this, but that's my medical alert little band thing. And it's real small. I can't put my entire medical history on, my watch band. So in order to try to fix that issue, there are some common abbreviations and conventions with setting up your medical alert ID. If you're allergic to a certain type of medication, don't say, I'm allergic to blah, 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 blah. Put no and then the medication's name. So for me, I would say no aspirin on my medical alert ID, because if they give me aspirin, I will have an asthma attack and it will not be good. If you have a transplant, say you have a kidney transplant, you would put kidney, TX, and that means kidney transplant. And that way it's just a little bit faster than saying kidney, writing out the whole thing. It can save you some characters and give you more space for other things. So for type 1 diabetes, I couldn't find anything specific for type 1 diabetics, but I know within the community, T1D is a common shorthand. And I know for type 2 diabetes T2, insulin dependent, if they're insulin dependent, is a common abbreviation. So I'm sure diabetes T1, insulin dependent, would also be helpful for type 1 diabetics. Again, I'm not an EMT. I don't know, but I figure it would be useful information to have. And then if you have any other chronic illnesses, check and see if there are any common abbreviations that you may not know, just because it could save you some space on your medical alert ID, and that could be used for other things if you have other things to put on there. Okay, so some benefits to wearing or carrying any type of medical alert ID. You will get better quality care. If you need specialized care of some kind, it'll be easier for medical personnel to give that to you if you say that you need it, or it's written that you need it somewhere on your person. It could also prevent you from getting medication that you can't have, or things that interact with your other types of medications that you have. And it'll just make the quality of your care so much better. If you have one on and you need certain things, they can get you get the point. Perspective. It can help paramedics understand your symptoms a little bit better. Sometimes people with medical conditions have weird symptoms that don't really line up with this stereotypical set of symptoms for different diseases. A non-emergency example that comes to mind is with urinary tract infections, or UTIs, and people who have dementia. People who have UTIs normally are in a lot of pain when they need to pass urine, and those types of symptoms. I'm sure people know the symptoms of a UTI because they're fairly common. However, if you have dementia, they can make you really, like UTIs can make you really agitated and withdrawn, and that's not a normal symptom of a UTI. But that's something very specific for people with dementia just because of how the brain processes things. Just kind of interesting. So in terms of perspective, it can help EMTs or medical response people in general like know a little bit faster what's kind of going on with you specifically in whatever situation you're in. Medical alert IDs can also help bystanders react appropriately to you having a medical emergency. They can be witness to some things and they might not know exactly what to do, but if they don't know a little bit about your medical history, they might not know how best to help you. So there's like, oh goodness. So for example, kids with allergies, you might find it useful to have like allergic to peanuts or whatever it is that they're allergic to on a medical ID, and then say where the EpiPen is or where their EpiPen should be. That way, if a bystander comes across them having an allergic reaction, they can administer the EpiPen and call 911 for that child to be able to get to the hospital and get treatment more quickly than, oh my God, this kid is like choking. Like, what do I do? Do I give them like the Heimlich? Like, what do I do? They don't need chest compressions because they're like breathing, like, you know, bystanders get worried. They're not trained medical professionals. And sometimes having, you know, a little bit of a clear little picture into this patient's history can be useful. So obviously, I've mentioned this before, but there's limited space on medical IDs. And there's a lot of info sometimes that you need to put on there. So how can you make sure that your entire medical history gets put on these little bits of metal? You can't. Sometimes an app might work better for you. If you have an extensive medical history, you might need to have an app or a QR code that links to a website that you can update with your medical information. It just kind of depends on you and what your doctor decide is best for your care. If you do have something that's not a physical medical ID on a physical medical ID, it might not get checked in an emergency situation though. Just because I'm sure in an ambulance ride, they're not going to be trying to scan your wrist for a QR code when they're like trying to resuscitate you or they're trying to like make sure you're okay. They're not going to be really worried about the QR code that's on your person. They're going to be more like concerned with making sure you get like the highest quality care that you can have. Whereas, you know, if you have something written on a bracelet or a necklace, it can be a little bit easier for them to take in that information rather than go to the website or app or whatever and figure it out. It's a little bit easier if it's handy. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to decide what you want. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience now. I always have on a medical alert ID if I'm leaving my apartment or my house. And I say that because my dorm is an apartment. It's weird. Anyway. So I got mine from Road ID. It's on a little watch, or it's on a little strap that I put my watch face on. And the reason I have a watch and wear a watch all the time that's not an Apple Watch is because I took a CNA training class and the nurse instructor was like, you're not allowed to have an Apple Watch or a smartwatch. You have to have a watch with a face, with all the numbers on it, and with a second hand. And so I have a watch with all the numbers on it and a second hand that's not digital. And I pretty much always wear it. And that's why my medical alert like thing is there. It just made it easier for me rather than having a watch band and my medical alert ID. It just made it a little bit easier for me to consolidate the two. So on it, I have, I can't read it. On it, I have my name, my home city, my 2 emergency contact numbers. So I have my mom's and my dad's cell phone numbers on there. I also have type 1 diabetes and asthma. And I have on there that I carry a CGM, which I now no longer do. I now am on a pump, thank goodness. But so I need to update my emergency medical ID. I got very quiet there at the end. I apologize. That was weird. It's fine. So I need to put on there other things like no aspirin or stuff like that, just because it could be useful in an emergency situation. All right, everybody, that's it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please click the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you want to learn more about diabetes from a patient perspective, please feel free to keep tuning in because I'd love to have you. As always, I will see you all in a couple of weeks. Stay healthy. Bye.